All right, hi everybody, welcome. It's Thursday, June the 23rd, if my chronometer is correct. And this evening I'm super excited to welcome a guest speaker, and I will now introduce her. Her name is Kristine Steuart. Welcome, Kristine.
Thank you.
I will now embarrass her. She grew up in Burnaby, went to Burnaby Central, went to SFU. Yay.
Sorry, some Burnaby Central.
Okay, all right.
Great.
You can talk afterwards.
Oh, yeah.
SFU, and studied communications and sociology. She did the co-op. Sounds like you did plenty of co-ops.
Yes, lots,
with us. And her last co-op placement was in tech at what was then Segal, which became Crystal, and then SAP Decisions.
Yep.
So,
some other. Okay.
You've got
nice.
some fans.
It's a good alumni.
Now, subsequently, Kristine and her sister, Catherine, co-founded Allocadia, which some of you will have heard of. You founded that in 2021?
Yeah.
Was that?
No, in like 2010.
Oh, 2010.
Yeah.
Oh, and went on to raise about $30 million of various forms of angel and venture capital. Kristine was the CEO of the company, and she led the Allocadia team as they worked with some of the best known companies in the world, including Unilever, Philips, ServiceNow, and SAP. As they formed global partnerships with Oracle, IBM, and Adobe. No, okay, some disrespect over there. As they transformed a legacy category, which Kristine is going to tell us all about. And we just, in fact, in the last week have discussed digital business transformation. To become a leader in the Forrester Wave for marketing performance management. The Allocadia team created a culture of running together, earning community engagement and company culture awards along the way. In 2021, now this is where the 2021 date becomes relevant, Kristine led the company to a successful transaction for its customers, shareholders, and 150 employees by bringing together Allocadia and Brandmaker in a $200 million deal with a PE firm. And this represented the largest exit for an all-female founding team in Canada. So let's hear it already. Her leadership passion is to help people create confidence and to create engaging employee experiences to grow careers and scale businesses. She's also a student of strategy definition, anchoring teams on a one-page strategic plan. And that is about the right length for a strategic plan, in my experience.
Exactly.
So with that, I would very much like to introduce Kristine and hand things over to her, and we'll hear her story. Kristine.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrew. It's so great to be here. That was a good long intro, but it's nice to be back sort of at SFU. It's been a while. I finished my degree just down the road here at some of the night classes as I started my career in tech, and it's just a really fun time, obviously. So I know many of you have started careers or changing careers, and hopefully you can take some of the learnings and some of the stories I'm sharing today into your future path. So as Andrew mentioned, I co-founded Allocadia with my identical twin sister. So if you do see her around town, we look very similar, Catherine. And since we are at SFU, a bit of a background and my history. I tried to find photos of me at SFU, but I don't have them. So if you guys are ever going to do this story in 10 years, take photos lounging around the campus or something and with your colleagues. But so you get my grad photo, Burnaby Central, grew up in Burnaby, and I think we lived just a really, I'll call it West Coast lifestyle. My parents grew up in Quebec, deep Quebec French, and they came out here to do lots of sports, go to the ocean, go skiing all the time. My mom used to teach skiing. My mom's a top tennis player in Canada. She just won the provincial. She's 70. And our dinner room conversations were always strategy, execution, knowing your opponent, mindset as much as your strategy and sort of your physical work. And then I put a picture here of my dad too, because he was always building something. Just the other day, he spent 2 days at my house building something, and I said, "Dad, you're just a machine." And he goes, when you start something, you just have to finish it. So we'll talk about execution in this session also, but just grew up with a really active family. My younger sister, of course, all my pictures are of her too in those photos. Michelle Malpass, her husband, Greg Malpass, he came to one of these sessions and they grew traction to 1,300 people and they just sold it to Salesforce. So we've had a very big 2021 as sort of a combined family and lots of good entrepreneurial stories around the table. That's a bit about me. And the history on Allocadia, actually a bit of this starts from SFU. So as Andrew mentioned, I did the co-op program, which I just loved. It took me 6 years to finish university because of that and a bunch of traveling in between, which was really, really fun. But did sort of government, tourism, and when I came into tech as my last co-op at Crystal, I think there's a bit of a history here in the room. There's a big alumni in town of Crystal alumni. I just found my passion. I loved it. It was fast moving, it was leading edge. We were working with some of the biggest companies in the world and we were learning so much. My career progressed in the 4 or 5 years there. And then Allocadia really started from that classic entrepreneurial start of experiencing a pain firsthand and then setting out to solve it. So I was a marketing manager. We managed multi-million-dollar marketing investments at Crystal. And our whole reason for being was to give business end users the data and information they needed to move forward. And yet as marketers, we didn't even know what we were spending. So companies spend around, can be around 10, 15, 20% of revenues on marketing. And I eventually quickly learned through some of talking to customers, building our prototype, et cetera, that this was a big pain point. Our chief marketing officers in big companies around the world don't have visibility into their plans, their marketing spend, and then how they measure performance. So left Crystal, started a family, and 1 day a week just started a services business, kept seeing the same problem with my marketing customers, which I know is how a lot of entrepreneurs start businesses too. Sometimes you start a services business, you build for your time, and then you want to scale that to actually bring a product to market. And just with my sister, she'd flown back from Norway. She was doing her master's there, doing web design too at Yahoo. And we just started sketching out things 1 day a week for me to get away from crying baby and make my brain work a little bit. And we built a prototype and we sold one customer at a time. And that's really how we started it. We sold $1 million in software before we brought on investors. So a lot of that was just my sister and I grinding out selling that, learning, selling on mock-ups, and proving it, implementing it, seeing them realize value, and then do the next one. But as Andrew mentioned in there, I just was there. We just worked with amazing customers and amazing companies. These logos, these were very progressive CMOs, thought-leading CMOs, and we just did a lot of fun work with them. So we had thousands of users around the world. This was a map. I think there was people that were logging in from the Amazon, which we thought was pretty cool. So all around the world. Okay, so I'll share this as a sort of 5 keys to success. I will definitely share the hard parts and what parts of this we didn't get. But I'm on the BC Tech Board, and we talk a lot about tech companies in BC. So there's around 11,000 tech companies, and only 2% of those companies get to above 100 employees, which is just something we really need to change in BC, those stats, are fairly similar across Canada, but definitely in BC, we have just a lot of small companies. And if we really want to build that tech ecosystem and grow careers and jobs and thrive in that and see these spin-offs, just like Traction and Allocadia were spin-offs of Crystal. Norm Francis, Pivotal, was an investor and advisor in Allocadia, and he really helped build Allocadia. So there's just an ecosystem that gets built around, and certainly we need to be striving towards that and then some as we build bigger companies in Canada. But I put this together sort of thinking, well, how do we do that? How do we get to over that number of employees? Obviously a measure of success for companies is your customer value, your employee value, and of course your shareholder value. And I certainly feel like we built that over years, especially at this last transaction also. And now the company continues. It's 350 people around the world now, and it's continuing, which is super exciting. That transaction was really to kind of create that next inflection point of growth and become the clear category leader. And we'll talk, you'll learn a little bit more about the company as we go through some of the lessons. But so these were the 5 buckets I put together. Customer value, we had a large TAM and a macro trend. We had category leadership. We were very sound on our sort of metrics and operational discipline. I think that's timely. You guys are going to be going through metrics. And then people and culture. And of course, lots of people will say these things, they do these things in their companies, but what I'm going to try and do is share just some kind of unique pieces that we really did to sort of nail these different things as we built the business. Okay, customer value. I have to start here because first and foremost, when you're building a company and business, if you're not understanding the value you deliver and how they realize that value, and if your customers aren't, of course, renewing and growing, then it's hard enough as it is. That is just the baseline. I do understand from your projects, you have to be talking to customers. This is just how my sister and I built this. And I do think we did this very uniquely at Allocadia and very diligently. We were just not afraid of our customers. They would call us in the beginning. They would sign up from Google AdWords marketing budgeting software. And I remember these stories from these customers, like, I think that's the CEO and the founder who are demoing to us. And of course, they knew that, we knew that, but we just do the demo, we would answer, and we built relationships. And your early customers are, there's no way to hide that. They are going to be investing in you because they believe in you as people and founders, and they believe in the idea because, trust me, there's going to be all sorts of things that aren't going to go well, especially with some of your early customers. So building that relationship. We absolutely had a culture of co-creating with our customer, and we would share that with them. So we were showing them live software that was working, but we were also selling mock-ups. I remember we'd have a bad call, with a prospect, and then we go, oh, okay, well, what if we design this and mock up that and go back to them? And, you just can't give up on some of those early customers. As we grew, this was companies and some of our customers at GE Healthcare, Dell. These were the global CMOs in the room doing working sessions with us. We were enterprise SaaS, so we were very engaged with our customers. Even in a product-led growth world, and we can talk a bit about that on the product side, you have to know your customer, right? You can't be sort of a no-touch with your customer. And these were chief marketing officers on this one. There's 3 CMOs, Tableau. We had a CMO here of Informatica. And this was something we also did really well. We didn't shy away from our executive buyers. So I see a lot of founders and early startups sort of shying away from your executive buyers. So you do have to get to know them. And of course, how do we deliver that customer value is, of course, via the product. And I'm still surprised when I talk to a lot, I've known lots of CEOs and founders. We were overall in the MarTech space. There was just an explosion of vendors in the MarTech space. And there was a lot of people that didn't get through, didn't make it. They had to shut the doors or do fire sales. And a lot of these postmortems from some of these founders was just that it was really a it was really a want versus a need. And I've heard that through some of your ideas, sometimes you have to go back to the drawing board. I mean, you could spend so many years building something that is a want. And when there's going to be hard times, just like now in the market, and times when your buyers are going to start to be picky and want to spend less and might be more apt to churn, but you just have to have a product that becomes a need. And I think that's extremely difficult when you're creating a new category. So we'll talk about that as part of it, because we were sort of creating a new one, sort of transforming an existing legacy one, which was one of our big challenges. And then obviously it's about value. I'm sure this room here knows this, but we did a lot of work around quantifying that business value. Of course, if you're selling to enterprise, a bit different than more consumer tech or consumer type of apps, but you still have to be able to quantify what the value is, and making money and driving more revenue and driving efficiencies or saving money is definitely kind of a base formula for enterprise SaaS. Detailed slide, but the point of this one here is that we did a lot of work understanding the maturity level, let's call it, of our customers as they used our software, and how we could guide them through using that software. So if they were sort of a level 1 user, then a level 2, level 3, level 4 maturity. And this is, of course, what really helped with retention metrics and expansion of different seats, of different features, et cetera. So whatever your version is of that, it's an interesting trend with product-led growth. So you can land within a customer. Let's say you have 5, 10 seats, you can grow that to 50 seats and 100 seats almost through your product. And this was our next path of innovation at Allocadia. But the progression of value that your customer experiences with your software, you just need to understand it deeply, right? That can be for any type of software. And what makes them sticky, what makes them stay, and therefore where you need to work on these things as you go forward to keep those customers. At Allocadia, we were also just, because we built those relationships and executives and co-creation, and we were able to deliver that value, we had strong advocates. And this was something that just kept carrying through over the years. I would go meet with those big partners at IBM, or go, oh, Allocadia, I've heard of you guys. We go into a meeting and, this CMO is talking about you, that CMO is talking about you. It was just something we did exceptionally well. And I remember it's a founder of Eloqua, and a good Canadian success story in MarTech, selling to the CMO. We partnered early with them. I'll talk a bit about partners in go-to-market. But he had said that one of our advantages in Canada are our people, and our ability to sort of empathize and connect and listen. And a lot of our customers were North America, and I don't know, they would just advocate for us and tell our story to other big players in the space. So just can't emphasize enough. You could see we brought some customers out to Vancouver. We did some campaigns, and it was really important to share those stories of customers and their value. And I'm sharing this because I know you guys are all thinking about early stages. So this was one of our first versions of our website. We were never a company that had to pivot. We were always deep going into budgeting first, then planning, then measuring ROI. And it was about executing through that over the years. But those were some of the 3 customers on the screen here that we just grinded out. Like, you just got to figure out any way to make it happen. And it's hard. It's really hard. And it's a roller coaster, and it's up and down. And then you think it's a bad idea, and people don't get it, or they're looking at it for a different reason, and you're learning so much, and it can be super challenging time while you're also putting money in. like my sister and I say, your after-tax dollars, hiring and paying for your engineers and building the product, and it's not full. Like, it's just a really stressful time, but you just have to figure out how to make it all work. I also had a baby at that time too. So just like making all these things work was definitely complicated, but that's the start. We had little milestones where we would say, okay, if we get 10 customers on it, okay, that's good. Then we're on to something, and we can keep going. Or okay, if by this time frame we've got to stop putting money, our own personal money, into this, then we're on to something. We weren't paying ourselves paychecks for a long time. And we just sort of kept having those milestones as we went forward. And this was us always very early customer interviewing. That was our COO and early executive team member that was doing that interview. So metrics, you guys will be talking about metrics. What's so good about the customer side is very easy to measure if there's value being delivered to your customer. And obviously retention, I put there. And then net retention, which is expansion of your customer. Of course, this applies in enterprise SaaS. It also applies in consumer SaaS. You probably see this on the news, for example, with Netflix and subscribers. It's all about that retention of your subscribers. This was a stat we were sharing in the summer, and I mean, we were just exceptionally good at that all the time in our history. We had, above 90% gross retention, close to 110% net retention, and so we were always growing. If you have 80% gross retention and you're not actually growing those customers, you have to make up 20% and all the sales and marketing dollars to invest into that to even be flat. And then you have to go above and beyond to do your net new. So what happens is if you go to investors when you don't have good retention metrics, they're just going to see a leaky bucket, and they're just going to see their money sort of being washed away. And clearly, no one likes that, including yourself. And one thing I learned in speaking with PE just over and over is that investors feel like they can fix a growth problem in net new. They feel like there's patterns in growing net new, and I somewhat agree with that. There's some patterns around how you scale, bringing more customers on, but they don't typically feel like they can help a retention problem because it's a value problem. And they know that you're the biggest expert on your customer, on your business, and they can never come in and say, I know budgeting, planning, and performance. And to them, this is their proxy for this company delivers value. They know their customer, right? They can retain and expand them. And now it's just about getting more of those. And that's when, the light bulb sort of goes off, and they want to invest money if fundraising is a path you want to take. And we'll talk about why we chose that path. The next one here, I feel like one thing we did really well, and this is kind of tied into category leadership and one of the hard parts, so bear with me as I go through, but we definitely had a large market that we were playing in, and there were legacy and related established categories that we played in. One was called marketing resource management, but it didn't include everything we wanted, like performance management. It was an old school kind of connotation with customers, with the market, with analysts. It wasn't growing a lot, wasn't necessarily big. Now that has changed because of macro trends, so I'll talk about that in a second. Enterprise performance management, which was selling to the CFO, and then collaborative work management, which was more work management software across the whole company. And we were, of course, focused on the marketing seats and end users. And then we had finance stakeholders. But we could show that it was a really large total addressable market that we were going after, and we were sort of a cross-section against that. We had debates over the years on what do we call it, an MPM, and do we create new, or do we transform that and shift that? And I'll talk a bit about what we chose. But In the past year or two, we were really feeling an inflection point from a big macro trend, and that is helpful. So if you're in a company and your company is doing something where there's a big macro trend, so even before COVID, people were talking about the future of work and collaboration across teams and distributed teams, and it just got amplified through COVID. So it wasn't just a COVID thing. In our world, I love to use the example of the comparison of the CRM for sales or like your Jira system for engineering. We had a direct comparable in sort of Aptio doing sort of planning and budgeting and performance for IT teams, and a huge market cap and valuation. So there was a lot of good comparables that we could say, and that we were doing that for marketing. And the best is yet to come, so to speak, on the category and the growth of the company, which is why we did that transaction, so we could take advantage of that macro market momentum, have a deep partner who was putting money on the balance sheet and growing and scaling the business going forward. So this always helps. We had quote that this had never happened before, right? Before 2-3 years ago, we were really sort of driving a new conversation, and that was part of why we chose to grow smart and not do a growth at all costs. But we will talk about financing in a second. And so the reason why we went and did fundraising was, I'm sure many of you, as you think about these business ideas, and if that's the path you're going to take sort of post-school here, is do I bootstrap? Do I do this on my own? And a lot of VC companies, those 11,000 companies I was sharing, do that. Or do I go fundraise? And the way I always looked at this was, it was just totally context dependent. You know, who were our competitors? What were we trying to do? Was it a big market? Did we have the best customers and leading customers? Could we win in it? And you know, do we have to raise, or else someone else is going to do that? And just, you can't be a small player in that market. And so for me, it was, we were signing up these amazing companies and delivering value, and it's like, well, this is something worth winning in. So let's go on the fundraising path. And back then, you typically did $1 million seed and a $7 million A, like around there. Now, although that might change in the more short term here, but you know, seed rounds and Series A were sort of really bigger numbers to get going, which would have been great to do that for Allocadia, but it's not how people were doing it. Okay, so category leadership. So you guys have, I'm sure you've seen this or gone through this red ocean, blue ocean. I still like this as a frame for building and thinking about categories in a very simplistic way. That you sort of have those categories where you create a company where it's established, there's money being spent on it, and you're just going to go do a better solution, and you're just going to go capture that market. We're using Zoom as a perfect example. Then you've got blue ocean, which is really, you are creating a new market. People don't necessarily have the budget money set aside that they would normally spend on this, and you're telling them this is a problem. And this is where, for us, we were sort of a combination of this. We had a category, like I said, that was defined, but it was very limited and very operational and not strategic, and not kind of what we knew it should be. And so we were transforming it. There were some players, but not big players. But we were sort of transforming it and really creating something new, a different type of software, and how they would use that and solve that business problem. So that was part of our challenge, is that we were kind of in both. And how do you market to that? How do you fund that? Because building a category takes a lot of money and marketing and spend, and we did very good at that with our customer advocates, et cetera. But one of the little nagging sort of question marks in my brain in terms of just what could we have done differently, and I really think maybe Allocadia could have grown faster, bigger, by investing more into the category creation. Yet there's also the element of, okay, but you can invest in that before you have market momentum, spend all your money, and get into big trouble. And ultimately we'll never know the answer to that. And the best is still yet to come because we have macro market and attention on this. So now was the time to go and do that, which was what this transaction was about. So you absolutely have to have strategies that address where your category is and what you want to do next in the category. And so to become a category leader, always say best product wins, best value wins, especially in enterprise SaaS, absolutely ecosystem wins. We had always huge points for this from our customer, from partners, from the market and analysts, because we were connected into SAP and the ERP and Oracle Financials, and we were connected into all what we call the do side of marketing, all the email marketing, the social and digital AdWords, et cetera. So it was a big part of our strategy. We also had BI embedded. My job at Crystal was to sell embedded BI, so I think we were one of the first to do like cloud BI in our application very early with one of the vendors in the space, which was fun. And then in category best sort of vision wins too. We got a lot of points for that. You'll see us on the analyst quadrant. We were really evangelizing the category. We did have a really strong innovation roadmap. That's a big part of what my sister and co-founder was leading. But then importantly, of course, you're executing against that. You need to show your proof points of executing against that, and we were able to do that. So this was our analyst category. We did have Lori Schultz, the CEO of Galvanize, on our board. She was so amazing. She is also such a big, of course, advocate of analysts and categories and improving your position on that for visibility with your customers, with your market, and for the types of investment outcomes you're looking to do also. But we did have the legacy. We were getting our leadership within that legacy category. So there was sort of subsets of use cases called money management, and we advocated to get performance management added into that. So they finally did that, and of course we were a leader in it. And then which is the next phase now, is sort of broadening that to planning and collaboration. And that's sort of that next evolution, because that really ties into the macro trend. Now, you can't really see it on this picture, but we were here, so we got lots of big points for strategy and execution. And this brand maker here was the company that the PE firm owned, and we came together to clearly create the category leader. And they did very complementary use cases. They did not do what we did. So this category sort of had 5 or 6 core use cases. We did 2 or 3 extremely well. They did 2 or 3, and now bringing us together means that you're the clear category leader. So it's super fun, and it was a strategy. Like, that was a big strategy that I worked on for 6 months to a year to actually make that happen, so we could go and capture the next wave of the market. And just a note here too, I put the competitive strategy. You do have to have the lens of what your competitors are doing and where you'll fit there. First lens for me is always customers. I keep going back to that, and to me, they help build category. They create that. They help shape it too. You're sort of doing it together. It's that co-creation. But absolutely, you want to be thinking about what your competitors are doing and being strategic about that. And when you're doing category, storytelling does matter. I have to admit, I used to sort of roll my eyes a bit when it was like storytelling for the VCs and investors, and I finally learned through many pitches that's very important and you have to do it. And they're thinking 10, 15 years ahead, so you have to be painting that picture when your day-to-day is all about, well, I just need to build this feature, sell this customer, and you really have to balance those two worlds. But with the market, with your analysts, with your investors, and most importantly with your customers, you do have to storytell on what you were trying to do. We had an amazing concept that just worked so well in the market. It was memorable. People would comment on it. This is part of why we were known in our space, was the whole world of MarTech was what we called do marketing, and they were all external and execution channels. But we were the internal operational side of marketing. It was white space, the planning, the operations, the collaboration. And people just got that. You run and do, and you sort of execute on your campaigns, then you collect the data. We had green runners that all sorts of people. We had, at one point, the chief product officer of Oracle Marketing Cloud, huge event, had our green runners on stage. Like we did really good on that, but I still wonder, it's like I still feel, could we have done more on that? I don't know. It's one of those things of being an entrepreneur, you're always wondering what more you could have done. So that's the hard part. This was a mural. You'll see a bit of a butterfly theme. We had a theme of transformation. And we had this mural made, Sandy Pell, so great. And her husband, they do these murals. You've maybe seen them in some of the offices. But yeah, I just wonder if there was an incomplete kind of investment there. This is what we did now, right in August, right? It was a huge investment to go after that. So it was the right time to do that. And there was good shareholder value all along. It's more of just like a wonder of a bit earlier, a bit something different. Every company has their story and their path. And you sort of analyze yours to figure out what makes sense and if you made all the right moves. But operational discipline. There's our butterfly theme again. So as I mentioned, Lori Schultz was on our board. I think you said the stat of the exit in Canada. I think she definitely has the first, she likes to call it the first, exit, $1 billion plus of a woman CEO, which is fantastic. Obviously, that's any accomplishment. But it is unique, and we'll talk a bit about women in tech and leadership in tech. But she taught me this one pager. This is, of course, the value of advisors and people who are many steps ahead of you, helping you along the way. So we would go for quarterly breakfasts. I can't even remember how I met her. All I know is that we did quarterly breakfasts all the time. And then she joined our board, and I cannot say enough about her. But she had a strategic one-pager plan. This has a lot of text. We had a lot of different versions of it. The point here wasn't to show you what was on it, but it was a great way to anchor the team, but more importantly, too, your executive team to come together deeply once a year, and then we would do a mid-year and then refresh even quarterly to show and tell the team you've got a strategy, you've written it down. Like anything, we'll talk about execution in a second because I have the bent towards execution, and you don't know if you've got the right strategy if you're not executing and testing things and getting it done. And what did you call your plan? You guys have like it's a
This is model canvas?
Yeah, the canvas, exactly. We use that label sometimes. And they typically have the same type of things on it, right? We have sort of mission, vision. We had our culture and values on there. We had how will we win, and then we bucket it into where we will play. So all your go-to-market, whether it's your segments, verticals, target personas and customers. I think the how you will win was sort of a key factor. We really sort of analyzed deeply when we got together as the executive team. And then the bottom part, 5 was a bit too much. We typically had what we called around 3 spotlight goals, we called them. And they were big change initiatives in the company. And typically we would have someone from the team who would raise their hand, wanted to lead sort of a cross-functional initiative. And it was a great way to get them some experience and leaders within the company, kind of putting something else on their resume and bringing the team together. So there was always an executive sponsor.
Can I
yes.
add that this is vital
Yeah.
and extremely hard.
Yes, it is hard. These are some of the hardest things too when you're thinking about alignment and where you focus and what if your some of them think differently. This can sometimes bring out, real challenges in your team and your alignment, but you have to grind through it
You
or
have
else.
to write it all on one page, you can't fake it or you can't
No.
fudge it.
Exactly.
It's crystal clear.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so these things can take weeks and weeks.
Yeah.
And lots of heated conversations.
Absolutely, and you have to have a culture with your exec team where you can talk about those different strategies and what you want to try, what you don't want to try, what capability you have to execute to change something. And typically that's what we would talk about. What do we need to do that's new or different, right? Because otherwise you can do business as usual. There's things you have to do. You have to support your customers. You have to renew them. You have to implement them. We have to bring on new ones. But a lot of strategy we tried to focus on was what was the new and next and different thing. And that's what we were talking about at the exec team level, and what we had to go and change. This is just pulling out a bit of that piece of where you play, only because there are a bit of standards, a bit of what I talked about in terms of retention and value. How you will do that will be different probably for each company, but how you might scale that, there's some patterns. So, we started very deeply into B2B tech, and then we started going into different verticals, CPG, financial services, but you have to learn a lot about that and do a lot of different things in your company to go there. But that's a logical expansion to go to your next phase of company. Then we would do a lot of land and expand, more seats, different business units, new packages. Those are very logical, and we did those things. And sort of the light purple, blue, was what was next for us, which is again why we went on the path to go create and that sort of next point of growth, find a deep investment partner to go and do those things. And so we were going to expand our use cases. So from that category, right, we had a few core use cases, but we wanted to expand that, go into new regions, and you could also acquire companies, et cetera. And when we met this PE firm, it was just a logical combination because it was Insta. They were based in Europe, had a big customer base in Europe. They, of course, had the complementary use cases. Like it met all the goals for what we wanted next in the company, and then some. It's not nothing bringing together two similar sized companies. Like it's, you're focused on, let's call other aspects too, but definitely an injection to get to these different go-to-market points. And then partners. So this was also something we did just really, really good. I think this was my background from my SAP days. I did partner marketing, so I kind of got that you could partner up with like-minded companies who had lots of resources, lots of marketing investment, and lots of access to customers, and you could go win business together. And so early days, I would call up the executives. So I think for those of you who, if you're doing a company, become CEO, your job, right? Some of that job is executive buyers, like for us, that was CMOs. Then it's also strategic partners, right? You should be spending some of your time on that. And then, of course, team, right? Team and strategy, et cetera. But partners was something I spent some time and just called them up. Hey, we have joint customers. Tell your customer story, which is, again, we'd always anchor on those customers. That was the green runners on the big Oracle Marketing Cloud. We had a big partnership with Marketo, which was bought by Adobe for $4 billion. So they were a big player in our space. IBM on the right there. And then other vendors. But I put this one here on the left because early days, like we did not let our size stop us. We were tiny, but I would pick up the phone with these big companies. And, there's people whose their job is to connect and work with innovative companies and connect into the ecosystem. It's hard, like you're trying to cut through the noise, but we were able to do that, again, because of our customers, a bit on repeat on our customers. So under this operational discipline, of course, there's setting strategy, spending a bunch of time. You have to hash it out. You've got to pick your direction. But then there's execution. And I feel like, as an industry, we probably spend too little time thinking about and talking about ways to execute properly inside of your company. And it's hard. It's hard. And this is one part where if I look back and what do we do right and what do we do wrong, I think we had pockets of execution that were exceptional and then pockets of execution that were terrible, if I'm being frank. And it's just, we have all these frameworks on strategy and ways to go about this and engage with your teams, but there's no real framework, at least that I've read. I read a good book recently, It was the CEO of ServiceNow, now Snowflake, so I can't remember the name of the book, but he talks a lot about this, and I'm like, yes, this makes sense. I have a bent to execution, of course, as a founder. Probably as a founder, that's your good and bad as your company continues to scale, and how you scale yourself as CEO. But I put this little JFDI, sorry for the little acronym with the swear, but it became a little something in our company, and we used to have for our values these heart things. And it was one of our executives that used to say this, and it turned into something in our company when someone would do just a really good job and they would just nail something. On Slack, we'd sort of have the JFD. It was just something that, we did. So we really tried to obviously celebrate when someone was just doing something really good and just getting something done. But if you all find something on the execution side that's learning about how to execute properly, let me know, because I think it's good stuff and it's missing. Early days, obviously, it was all about execution. Yes, there was strategy, but okay, we were doing budgeting software and planning. We just gotta go figure that out. The strategy, in a way, continued, I think, to get more important. Your chess game, which tech is a chess game. I used to always think about that, right? It's just, you're playing little moves, and am I gonna do this? Am I gonna do that? Because tech can change so quickly and can change on a dime your markets and what competitors are doing. And to me, it was always just a game of making moves. But in early days, it was mostly execution. And so I put this photo here because that was one of our first offices. We did our seed round when we were maybe about that size. And it had no windows, so it was in Yale Town, okay? You walked in, it was really depressing. And you would walk into this front room, and everyone would be there hello, good morning. And a tiny little office where we would do our demos, literally right to the left of that photo. And then this was one of our executives, I think our whole executive team through it just nothing. He was putting together furniture. It was just what you had to do. But I put a photo of our last office. Not that I'm a big fan of what your office is, because we were always really smart about our office, and not sort of going beyond. But we eventually got the nice office with the really nice windows. It was 1 week before COVID hit. We moved in. So literally, it's right here, and it's beautiful. And it sat there for a year with tags still on things, from our new furniture, which was so painful. Anyways, now it's open, and about, a handful of people go in with the hybrid. It's so crazy. I still think there's going to be more who want to go in, but. Anyways, so just a bit of a funny analogy. There's a time and place for everything, right? You'll grind out the bad things in the office with no windows, but you'll eventually get there if you keep executing. And then the hard part on execution. So I said we had pockets of good and pockets of not so good. And we eventually got here on net new sales. But we had so many ups and downs on that. And if I can offer up any advice as you go on that path for growing and scaling a tech company, is focus deeply on scaling your net new sales acquisition. And what SaaS software company is not talking about pipeline every quarter? It's never enough. every SaaS company is doing that every quarter. It's all about your pipe. And we got so good at this in the last couple years. Just amazing sales leader, amazing sales culture, amazing partnership, amazing formula for how we would bring those customers on, productivity metrics, retention of our salespeople. But wow, did we ever have some hard times on there? And I'll talk just, disbanding whole teams, rebuilding back up, and that is a direct impact on your ability to continue to grow. Now, what saved us through that were, again, customers and our retention metrics and our expansion. So, you can weather some of those storms if you've got that baseline of customer value. And I was looking at memes. I'm not a total meme person, so this was the one meme thing in the PowerPoint. But I love that movie, and so I thought it was funny. and that's what's so funny about data. It's like, you gotta use it, you gotta do it, but like, how do you do that with the team? Especially if it's the broader team. Oh yeah. So we would be thinking of ways to make those metrics meaningful and still have that transparency and visibility and, make it sort of mean something. Because one thing I learned very early is you can't just point to a number to the team and go, we need to hit that. Like, it doesn't work that way. And we'll talk a bit about culture and people in a second. But we were just really good at using metrics and data. I always remember my investors said, well, you'd be shocked, Kristine, how few people have these business models and looking at this and do that. I'm like, what? How could you not know I don't get that. And I still sort of see that. Like, even in the early stages, I had spreadsheets that were showing, well, this many customers, and I think it's kind of shocking sometimes just how little of that. And that matters obviously when you're raising money, and for sure at an exit transaction like we had, it is all about the data. Like, you are doing deep dives on your business, like studying those numbers. It's a whole other level, but and we had all the big PE firms, looking at our business, and you have to know your numbers. But always retention, again, is the baseline. And for investors, the advice I guess I would give there, so I said why we raised money was just pick the person. This was something I always did. We had brand name firms at our at the table with term sheets. And we typically went with the firm that wasn't as brand name, but we liked the person, we were more aligned with them, and their growth philosophy. I'll talk about in a sec. These are some of the executives at big companies in town that were angels in Allocadia and helped out. I have nothing but gratitude for all the people on this page. We're big champions of me as CEO, as founder, and just wanted to be helpful, gave their money and time to grow Allocadia, and they were just an amazing group of people. And I think the biggest alignment we had with investors, so yes, it's a business relationship, but pick good people that will do right. I call it on the sort of business ethics side, let's call it. But mostly I was aligning on growth strategies. So I'm sure you guys have all heard a lot right now about this growth at all costs is gone. I've gone through a couple phases of that. And I will tell you that smart growth never goes out of fashion. I call smart growth being like not burning through cash like crazy. We were always very low cash burn, very low. We were always good on that. Like I said, it's everything in business are natural tensions, right? So, but were we investing enough in category creation? I don't know. Did I feel it was a bit too early to do that? Yes. Like these were choices, conscious choices we made as we went through in the business. Did that mean we raised 30 million and because at the exit, that was value all around, including for our employees. And so for every single employee. So there's a lot of good with that too. And it never really goes out of fashion. So focusing on those fundamentals, when we did our Series B, everyone was talking growth at all costs, but the investor on the other page, he was good with smart growth. And I felt I could be honest about the type of company I wanted to build, and he was happy about that. And their portfolio was sort of filled with that. And just a note on fundraising strategy. Like I said, overall, I think of the game of building a company in tech as like a chess game, but always results first. You have to have the metrics before you go on a path to tell your story to investors to be ready for fundraising. They're gonna look at that, obviously. Customer value was where we always, again, anchored, another picture of customer. And then I would tend to cast a small, not a wide net. A lot of people will go on sort of tours to go to tons of VCs and spend tons of time. And part of that could be more category creation, which is not a bad thing. But I would tend to go to this was a trip in Silicon Valley with my then CMO. And we had so much fun. We wheeled around in a Fiat and we went to 6 or 7 and had 2 or 3 at the table and picked one. This was also how I did university. I was very efficient. And sort of the least amount of work to get to the goal and outcome was what I would do. Anyways, that was my approach with fundraising. And my approach with fundraising was always do it, obviously, before you're running out of cash. So we would always do it on a high when things are going well, which of course is when people will often go, well, we'll keep going and we can keep pushing. But that's when I would go fundraise. I would do the small set and I would say, we're not quite going out right now. We don't need to. But if we find someone that we like, we will go with someone now. And that actually and of course we were ready to do that now. But that just makes the VCs, they think they're getting in a bit earlier and not everyone's gonna see you and whatever. It worked for me. There are strategies to fundraising. And the hard part is there's always, I call it the deal moment of truth on raising around. Some sticky term, some drama. I had board members that would sort of save me and unstick things, and that's what good board members will do. And I learned a ton through those experiences. And I've been known to tell my COO, I said, at least one cry per fundraising round. I will admit that. Those would be my breakdown moments. And then at our final transaction, it was 2. So, and it's just to say, these are the parts people don't typically like to share, but it's like there's so many emotions and you've been building for 10 years and all the drama, and when you feel like you're at that, what I call that deal moment of truth, where it's like, it's the yay or nay, or it's the, and you're in the big negotiation and it's it's just, there's just no way around it. You've been working on something for 10 years and there's stressful times. Okay, last, and it's good. I think we're going to do an hour and then maybe some questions. So we're right close to that. Culture and team. The best advice I ever received on kind of culture and building was from my board member. She's amazing. Nano de Gaspé-Beaubier Matrick, that is her name. She's wonderful, big, strong executive here in Canada, and she gives back her time and money and founders. And I have just so much gratitude towards her. But anyways, she says, Kristine, your job as CEO is to create a company that people want to belong to. And when she said people, she meant customers, team members, investors, partners, all stakeholders involved in a business. And I really anchored on that as a bit of my mantra. Of course, the hard part is, well, how do you do that? How do you make people feel belong? But intuitively, you kind of know that, right? To build a company, it's like people love to be a part of that when they feel like they belong. So I had that as sort of a guidepost when we were thinking about building culture. I put our values up here because you got to do it. You got to put them down. And of course, values only become real through actions. And we tried to get a bit creative with how we did our, run marketing, run together, run healthy. And we did, and we had, Slack and we used these, and our marketers were run creative. But, when I think of culture, there's so many different things you can do because it's through your actions. So my advice on culture is pick a few things that you want to anchor on, that you can do, that you feel will make a difference, and that will uniquely be about the company you want to be about. And for us, there's 3 things that we focused on. You will all pick different things, be different things. We absolutely focused on career growth because we sat around the executive team and said we had tech companies that gave us, and managers and bosses that gave us all these career opportunities, and we wanted to give that back to our team. And our whole executive team was just really passionate about that. So we kind of just focused a lot on that. Because we were a lot of women, we had at one point we only had 1 male executive on our exec team in enterprise SaaS. We're like, that is a unique experience for him. But because that, we just over 50% women, over 50% on our board. We were also a culture that really embraced women leadership and their style of, building and leading. And it was just very inclusive from that perspective, from a career growth. And again, you go back to our values, it's like, well, where does career growth fit in, right? And sure, it's in some of these, but it was a place we could define that we could act on. We also really focused on employee experience. This got hurt a bit, of course, with COVID. It was really hard to do an employee experience, but instead of, like I said, put the number up and that's our strategy, or the one-pager, we tried to create experiences around it. So engaging the team, that's how people feel they belong. We would rent little theaters, and this was one of my favorite company meetings. Jarell was one of our SDRs, that's our CTO. We did a Back to the Future theme. So first of all, it was really fun, great career. Jarell on the side was writing doing scripts and movie. And so I said, well, why don't you help me do a company meeting? And the whole team loved that he was able to do that. And being an SDR is hard. So if you do stuff like that and then you tell your strategy through that, it is a way to kind of build that sense of belonging in your culture. And then we also have this concept of embracing your whole self. And it sounds so silly right now, but before COVID, we had flexible work. People were going to Kelowna, the Sunshine Coast. They wanted to go travel South America, but I promise I'll work really hard. Okay, and they did. And but we were doing that before COVID. Now, like I said, it sounds a bit silly, but we did anchor on that. But I think more than just being flexible work, what to me that meant was we were embracing your whole self, whether you wanted to go travel. We had someone, husband was going to another job, and sure, go, but still work for Allocadia. Or sure, yes, having kids and the flexibility of that. Of course, that was a big piece at Allocadia. For me, that was just a picture I put. My mom used to come to our holiday parties. She was also, my parents were big at the Traction holiday parties. They're a bit legendary. People would come up to me and go, who is the lady doing the moonwalk with the gray hair on the dance floor? I'm like, that is my mom. So, but that was it. It was sort of like embrace your whole self. This was one, Catherine, she was really big on dreams. It was a thing when she just left Allocadia recently. There was this hilarious thing about her dreams and it was just, we embraced that. And this was one where she had this beaver thing and she had it for all the teams, and Kath did an amazing job of like giving to the team at different parts and highlighting what they were doing and investing in that. And so to me, that was more about just, it was Catherine, and she could bring that side of her to work, and we could feel that sort of everywhere in the company. Very close on time here, but yeah, I talked about the Canadian advantage. Org design is important when you think about team. That'll shift over time. And at the end of the day, you will be thinking about what you want to do in a way, just sort of the impact you had, right? Because a lot of times too, obviously I knew we delivered business impact. We had great relationships with CMOs, these amazing women. A lot of them were women. But it sounds cliche, but what you will think about really as you go through this is the people and the mark that you've sort of left on them. And I've just so many amazing experiences with these amazing team members and amazing executives, people who put their blood, sweat, and tears into this business. And that was a photo of, I had a big presentation with 4,000 people, and he was behind the demo. He had to mimic my demo in case something went wrong. And I just, people that have your back, and that ultimately is what it's all about in the end. And this is the hard part though, right? You've all seen this graph. Maybe it should be a higher slope. This is maybe not the right graph. But I do put this with team for a reason, because you can look at this for strategy, for execution, for your company overall, but I think the hardest parts in building Allocadia were when there was hard times with the team, whether your culture was off. I talked about that disbanding of a sales team, and it was just a total mess. And that was definitely sort of in the middle, I'll call it, of our journey. And you just feel like everything's falling apart and nothing's working, and you got to start all over again. Or you have to make a hard decision on someone, or they leave, a great person. Those were always the most emotional and hardest parts of building a business, I think. We're really about the team, and it's never going to be a straight line, but you will create some amazing connections and relationships through the process. Okay, 2 more minutes. Yin and yang of leadership. There's a duality to leadership I believe in. You have to be both strategic and execution. Tradition, which means looking at the past, but also looking at the future. This is why I think leadership is so hard and executive leadership is so hard. It's about context, knowing when to do top down and when to do bottoms up. Not I'm a more top down or a more bottoms up type of leader. It's very nuanced. You have to know when to pull from all those different pieces of leadership. It's one of my philosophies. Steer your ship. It's, the teeter-totter of when you have to really direct and when you want your team to direct, I think is some of the hardest things I've had to learn as a CEO and leader, and get really good at making decisions and hard decisions and fast decisions. I think that's just some of the hardest parts in the business. And then for women founders in the room here, so just you bring something unique to the table and you do belong in tech. Like I would be full room men, all my investor, the CEO summits, all men. And you know, some of the stats here, and again, I show some pictures of kids here only because, you know, I think there's a reality that a lot of women think about that in different stages and that you're with. We built Allocadia while we had kids and raised kids. Obviously, that doesn't have to be an element you do. A lot of dads do that too, but we don't talk about that. But women have a lot of question marks around that. And you can do it. We had supportive families and behind us doing that. But I put that first before I put this stat because only 2% of VC funding goes to women. It hasn't changed for 10 years. So on the left here, it's a live dashboard if you want it from PitchBook. And every year it stays around 2%. Even when there was tons of injection of capital in the past couple of years, it was still 2%. So more women became founders, but it was still in proportion the same. And this exit value shocks me. In 2021, only 0.8%. This was all female founding teams. And then the 5% of CEOs, like I said, I know them. There's not very many of them in Canada. But that's why I say you do belong. You can do it just like any other. You can be an all-female founding team. I think the stats are around 10 or 15% if like mixed founding teams. But it's doable. It's all the same challenges, all the same opportunities, all the same. And your leadership style is very much recognized and can be recognized by your team. Nothing big ever comes easy. So much hard work. I know that goes without saying. Perseverance is just, you got half the battle in doing a business like this. You got to just keep going. If you've got that customer value, hang on to that and build from that. You might have bigger problems if you don't have customer value, but hang on to that if you do. And create your own reality. I won't get into this. It's a weird painting my mom would bring to the office. Sad clown. I'm like, I can't put that up. She goes, yeah, but look, Kristine, if you flip it around, you create a smile. And this whole clown is a French clown that you create a smile. I was, oh my God. Anyways, I had to carry it. The whole team knew it. I had to bring it to each office because then it was just a superstition. I'm like, I got to bring this clown with me and, you know, create the smile. Anyways, it's just mindset matters. And my last slides, and then if there's questions. This, like I said, I am passionate about helping people build that confidence. And I've done a lot of research. I did the speaking session on it for our customers and our CMOs, and they loved it. But confidence is a choice we make to act, do, or decide when it's not sort of limited by fears. And I think, especially as sort of a woman founder and CEO, and there's a lot of stuff around, you know, nature and nurture that actually creates that for us. But you can change that and train your brain to build that confidence, but you do that through action and mindset. And there's a lot of science behind that, but you just got to start doing. And that's certainly the journey I went on with Allocadia, and I experienced that firsthand. I say I've been on a confidence journey, and you know, I just encourage all of you guys to do that, and you just do it by starting, by acting. So that's it. Thank you.
All right,
yes.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Questions?
It's a very good question. So I'll just repeat it for the recording. So sort of, yeah, did you experience that business pain, and was that sort of enough, or did we go and talk to other people to kind of learn more about it? And then were we really changing business process or sort of improving a business process and the way people worked? So the first question is, I definitely felt that pain myself, so I knew it was a big pain, and I could see my CMO and my whole global team having issues with that, and it was just a big waste of time and no visibility, et cetera. I did go talk to other people to make sure it wasn't just my own pain. And at first I went and talked to friends, and then I thought, well, they like me, they won't tell me. And so I knew that. So we actually signed up to a trade show, which was $10,000, which was so much money at the time. And my sister and I flew down. I just had my second, and because we were building prototype just real part-time. And that's where we went to strangers and got their feedback. And right at that show, and there was a lot of people because it was a marketing show, so I definitely encourage that. And then we were still getting the same consistent feedback. So that was a big pattern and sign for that maybe we were onto something. And then we built the prototype from there. And then to answer your second piece, yeah, that's a very good question. This is part of that maturity path I was sharing is like, we were ultimately changing. It was an existing business process. People had to spend money, they had to plan, they had to invoice against it. Marketers spend, that's what they do to drive revenue. But they were doing it very, very inefficiently and without visibility, and things would go off strategy very quickly if you had 400 or 500 marketers in your global org and the CMO couldn't control that in any way. They would only see what was spent after the fact by finance. So we were changing the way they worked, which was why it was hard. That's hard, to change how people work. It's very hard, but we were able to do that. That's where getting prescriptive with the path and the way that they change that work is really, really helpful. Yeah. Okay. Yes. The question was, our software was multifaceted, how we decide on features. The customers. We did always know we wanted to solve the budgeting pain first. Then we were going to solve the measuring ROI. Then we were going to solve planning and collaboration. That was more based on the strategy setting with the executive team and what we were hearing from our customers and patterns, what we also thought we should create, what were the bigger pain points, what did they not know yet, didn't exist. But I will say we were very deep on those use cases. I've seen companies that almost spread themselves too thin across multiple use cases, and then you're not leading in any one thing. And so, yes, you could say that's more, I'll use this quote unquote niche, but it was a huge market in those use cases. And then for this last transaction, you add use cases, right? There's different ways to invest in broadening your platform suite to capture more market. Yes. Yeah, that's a good question. So what's my leadership style when I kicked off, and how has it evolved over time? So I think being a CEO, being any executive, you have to be on a constant learning and growth curve, right? You have to study leadership, you have to evolve. And oh my goodness, did I do so many things wrong, and some things I got just by intuition and learning from others, like sitting down with Lori Schultz and learning from great leaders. But I would say my overall philosophy on leadership was that slide of yin and yang. I don't feel like you can sort of be just one thing or one type of leader. I think you have to know how to be a certain type of leader in certain types of situations at certain types of times with a certain person, and shift, sort of shape shift as needed. But I would say that overall, there's definitely, I think for many founders, it's moving from sort of an execution type of style and just getting stuff done and showing leadership that way, to how you do that with your team and with your leaders and them sort of guiding teams. And that's a big shift to make, I think, for any founder. And I definitely had some style on that. And after this transaction too, I was talking to a lot of leaders in the team, and they just said we were a very transparent culture, very inclusive, very real. There's no positioning, and sort of tried to keep it real. But yeah. Yeah, so the question is, in the early days, we had sticky software, but were some people fighting it and wanting to do something different ways? Absolutely. When you're selling into enterprise SaaS, so first of all, when you're changing a business process, there's going to be people that love the current business process. There's going to be a lot of people that don't like it and hate it. But you're gonna find your change agents who want to use a new way, a new software, a new system. So especially that's that typical, the crossing the chasm, and you get your early adopters type of stuff. And it's very true. And you'll get people who aren't afraid of bringing in a new way, and because they're changing work for 400 or 500 people, right, in our organization. And so yeah, I mean, those would be the deals. We would have some naysayers, so it's just about objections. You keep pushing, you keep trying. What about this? What about that? This is where you also don't give up. You sell, you try and shift their mindset. Sometimes they stay through winning the deal and they become a thorn in your side as you go forward. I mean, these are just, the realities of the buying process and implementation. But we did do a good job of then making sure they were seeing that value and often helping some of those people along the path. But those are the harder parts. That's such a good question. So I'll repeat for the recording is that we had a lot of women in our company, and just at all levels, technical roles, overall in company, in management, executive, and board. Like we were always above 50% for sure. And then, at one point too, we were only one male on the board, which was one of our VCs, and we were like, that's a very unique experience too, so especially enterprise SaaS. But we've often asked ourselves that, and at the company, I remember these conversations with our HR team about this. And by sheer nature of being two women founders, for sure, we attracted that type of person and profile people who were interested in that and wanted to learn about that and see about that. So that was always a hard answer to say, because like you said, people want to change that, right? And people want to create that. So much of our executive team, the men and women, it's part of that embracing your whole self and that career growth, right? You have to go out of your way to pull out and make, especially women, feel like their voice matters, like they belong, their point of view matters. Like there's just so many examples of, because I know they have those thoughts in their heads, but they don't often share, and I was exactly like that. And as CEO, I always sort of chuckled because I'd be in my office, and I love this, and up and coming kind of men leaders would walk by and they'd see me thing and wave and come and sit down and tell me, which is amazing, and I'd love to talk with them and what are you thinking, and it's great, but. This is just one small example, and of course these are generalizations, but I would see these patterns for sure, right? But the women walk by, and I don't want to bother the CEO, and I'm not going to say what that idea is, and I would pull them out. I'd be like, hey, come over here, come sit down. What's going on today? What are you thinking? Like, and it wasn't just me that did that. It was our whole executive team, and I think even through this transaction, the team was already seeing. I was telling a bunch of the women, now you can start to define what we were doing to create that culture. And they felt like they did have a voice and their ideas were heard. But I mean, other than just literally pulling those voices out, making that culture feel like their leadership style is welcomed and matters and is important and is embraced. It's through little actions. There's no one specific program or investment that we did that really ultimately created that. I picked investors that were women.
Since the onset of COVID and the pivot to flexible work arrangements, work from home or work from wherever, it's been transformative in terms of finding women for key roles. Just the ability. This was clearly a blocker before. Your ability to work from wherever you are and weave your work into your family schedule. It's no longer kind of, I don't know if we can really do that. It's just a given. That's what you now do.
Well, this is why I put this here, this sort of embracing your whole self, like that was it. This flexible work, I also felt really allowed for that. I mean, I was a leader that didn't check the clock. I had one of my executives, she would say, I'm just going to, I'm like, when will you? Like, I'm not watching the clock. Like, I just don't ever worry about that. And so we really embraced, it was just your whole self. If you have a family or if you had whatever it was, course, like, it doesn't matter what it was, that you could do that. And I do think that is more towards women and families. So, it's like this choice of leadership you can choose those pieces that do embrace those different styles and working families, etc. But yeah, yes. So the questions around the category creation and red ocean, blue ocean, and was it more of like a push and pull as we were creating new? And I'll answer that in a way. Different audiences were different things. So with analysts, it was always a push, which was very frustrating. We were always like, it should be this type of category. It should include this. It should evolve to this. But they sort of had their framework that was just set. And we all felt that was doing a real disservice to our customer. When we were talking to our customer, it was more of like a pull. We need this. We need to create that. Of course it has to do with planning. Of course it has to do with performance too. It's not just budgeting. And so sometimes that's where I also didn't want to overthink category too much either. Like I said, it was a hard part, but I just often anchored on the customer. The customer knows what we're doing. They know it's a big value point, and we're solving a big pain point for them, and it's working. And so, right, when we were evangelizing about the category to transform it and add things into it and to evolve it, it was more with the analyst, but it's important, you have to do that. And we would use the customer stories to do that. I think we really needed that macro market tailwind to propel the category forward, and that's what we didn't have for many years, because everyone was focusing on customer experience in MarTech for the CMO, as they should. It was all about how to digitize their business and how to move, do hybrid online, offline, store, et cetera. So it was a huge thing they had to figure out. They were figuring that out first before they were focusing on their operations. But that started to happen. They started to get that, I have leverage on my investment at the point of planning, not in my omni-channel, where am I going to get more leads, et cetera. And so we were, I guess that would say we were somewhat evangelizing with our customers too. I feel we were a bit ahead on timing. And we kind of knew that, which is why we grew smart and didn't do growth at all costs, which is the type of company I wanted to build anyways. But we're in that now, and we took advantage of that through 2021 when there was also a lot of investment available to go take advantage of that. So I feel like we did sort of what we could based on our, in a way, guesses about that. But the timing question is always a funny one for me, because it's like, can you create that market? And that's a bit of what I was talking about with investment. It's a hard one. There's no easy answer. Yeah. Yes. So to repeat the question, it's, we talked about sort of smart growth and, how do you keep growing when there's challenges for adding net new people into the mix? And right now, so everyone is thinking about that, right? There's going to be a tightening of spend from companies, from consumers, and this is a challenge you think about in good times, and then it's even harder to get that share of wallet when it gets even more tricky. And this is just the hard part about business. And I don't know, I come back to, again, just that core fundamental of, are you delivering value to your customer? And you can get creative with pricing strategies for sure. We would do quick lands. We sort of had a model where we do that, so you don't have to get them to make such a big commitment up front. Then you add seats, then you add some capabilities, then you can add maybe through some product innovation, a new feature they might buy. You also don't want your customer to feel like you're nickel and diming. Every time they turn around, there's something more you're selling them. And again, it comes back to delivering that value. So I don't, in hard times like this, when share a wallet matters, this is where the need versus want just gets that much greater. And you just have to know what it has to be a want, it has to be a need. And if there's any level of want, it's gonna be tough. It's gonna be tough, yeah. So the question is, at what point did we see an MVP? And I would actually say really early, because we did the prototype and went to this conference, we actually had, for sort of a year part-time, while we were raising, Kath had a full-time job. But we got customers up and running on that proof of concept, the MVP, right away. So we had 3, 4, 5 customers, and they were using it for the same pain point and the same value. And so right out of the gates, we kind of knew there was something there. There was some hilarious parts where it was like, okay, they put all their data in, they put the marketers, I remember this is one of the first customers, and they said, oh, can I see this, by that? And I was like, oh my God, that's BI reporting. I can't believe my app doesn't do BI reporting, and I came from a BI company. I was like, no. So we were learning feature things really quickly that had to be the base product because we were talking to the customer. And we weren't afraid to get on the phone. And keep in mind, I was not a salesperson. I mean, for 4 or 5 years, I was like, oh, talk to a prospect, freaked me out. And Catherine too was like, what? But just you have to get good at that. And of course, we were subject matter experts because we were marketers. So we could bring that to the table. So we weren't salespeople. But I had one of my SAP sales managers, executives would come in weekly and help me be a salesperson. I'm like, oh no, crap, Peter's coming. What did I do with my prospects this week? You had to become a salesperson. And of course, I would lean towards building product and doing because that was the fun stuff and the easy stuff that didn't mean selling. We just have to get good at it. Anyways, I hope that answers your question. Okay, yes. So the question is dynamics on the founding team and how we built that. And I touched a little bit too on exec team and that evolution. And there's companies that get to our size that don't have, in a way, formal executive teams. I'm always so surprised about that. Just how you start to scale. But in terms of founding team, I mean, we're a bit unique, obviously, that we were identical twins. But I will say we were very complementary skill sets. So, and Catherine she's been asked this before, and she'll be the first to say, Kristine was always going to be the CEO. A bit more of it was just the default. But what's funny about that, though, is that it changed over time. So in those early days, I was doing a lot of the selling, and she was doing a lot of the product. As we got into later stage, I mean, she was our biggest product expert, so she would help sell our biggest multi-million-dollar deals in front of double room theater presentations like this, because that's how enterprise they buy with big stakeholder groups. And she would bring on some of our biggest customers with, our CRO and our Chief Customer Officer. And then I was dealing and working on more product and innovation. So I think over time, even though I was always CEO, your focus area with your founder might shift and change. I also had an early executive, there was a picture of him here, and did all sorts of different executive roles, sort of had the title of COO, but that shifted over the years and time. We had just amazing executives. Some of that was really the harder parts when you have to make changes, and I talked about the sales team. That was such a hard hire. It's a hard hire for all CEOs. But executive team dynamics, I mean, it's so critical, and you need to have a well-functioning, healthy executive team. It's not easy to get that. Finding people with the right skill set for the right stage that fit even your leadership philosophy and your culture and how you work, and it's really difficult. And I think as a CEO, you're always thinking about building your exec team and what's next, and you sort of move from one to the next, and then you're evolving. But Catherine and I were always good as founders that way. We always just did whatever needed to happen in the business, and it was complementary. We couldn't do it without each other, and I think that's the key with good business partnerships.
Kristine, that was really exceptional. I want to thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Good. Thanks.